Form Check Friday, fool! What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Calgary Barbell. We're here doing some Form Check Friday. So first up, we got a guy named Ryan Bowie. I think that's how you pronounce your last name. If that's wrong, I apologize. But Ryan's doing some max effort lifts here. Now Ryan's squat, first and foremost, honestly looks really good. It's very Olympic style, pretty high bar-esque. You can see he's got a pretty distinct drop into the bottom, pretty distinct sticking point. Might be worth it if you're competing in powerlifting to try and work with that. The way that you're dropping into the bottom position, we might be able to cut the depth a little bit more push back into the bottom, then drop straight down, and see if you can find that or ride that fine line of loosening enough to get depth, but not enough that you're sacrificing pounds or kilos on the bar. Other than that though, squat looks great, man. I would say for the most part, just keep doing what you're doing. Maybe play with your bottom position a little bit. He's doing a bench press here as well. Now the bench press, I talk a little bit about sort of the two schools of bench press in terms of what I call the sink and heave and the constant tension. Now Ryan's very much doing a sink and heave press here, and you can see characterized by really sort of collapsing the weight down into his chest, popping it up really fast, and then hitting like a wall of a sticking point in the middle, having to struggle with locking it out. So might be worth investing some time, even if you just use it as, I got a couple lifters who do like a more sink and heave kind of bench press, but what I have them do is what I call a t-shirt press in training as like an auxiliary or an accessory movement to train them to be a little bit smoother, a little bit stronger, a little bit more controlled with their touch. And I'll have them come down and do a very light touch deliberately, just barely touching the t-shirt, hence the name t-shirt press. Maybe in this case, you're doing a tank top press. Anyways, you're just trying to develop a little bit more consistency and tightness with that touch. So if you use it as an auxiliary movement, that might carry over well to getting you through some of that more bottom end, building a little bit more momentum so you don't die quite as distinctly throughout that sticking point for lockout there. Lastly, he's got a bit of a comparison between a wider stance sumo deadlift and a narrower stance sumo deadlift. So wide stance sumo deadlift, and you can see his hips come up, but they stop very shortly after they start to rise, which I like. And a narrower stance sumo deadlift, wherein his hips come up a lot more, but he says that this feels a lot better. It feels like the bar moves faster and it feels a little bit more comfortable. So in that case, I would say start with your hips a little bit higher in your narrow stance deadlift, or I would try to be maybe a little bit more patient if you're gonna stick to the wider stance. It sounds like you're better suited for the narrower stance here. So I would just say start with your hips a little bit higher and sort of like, I don't wanna say tease, but tease your hips up into the right position to find that tension so you can initiate from there as opposed to initiating from down here, having it rise up, catch, and then go through. If that makes sense, if my little sort of hand motions are helping anybody, hopefully that helps. Honestly, man, you're a really strong guy. There's not a lot that needs to be changed, so hopefully my 2 cents is worthwhile there. Our next submission comes from Todd. Now, Todd just switched to sumo deadlifting 2 months ago here. And he says his hips are too tight and he can't get into a good position. First off, Todd, I want to say you pretty much are in a good position. I don't think that there's really much that you need to change. So maybe to your own surprise, you're actually doing a really good job sumo deadlifting. Not everybody is Yuri Belkin or somebody like myself even who can get really upright. That might just not be your design, your anatomy, your morphology, whatever you want to call it. That might not be the way that you're built. One thing I would get you to try and do, and it's tough because I can't see it from the front angle here, but I would try to just widen up a little bit, and I think that'll give you a tiny bit more room to just drop your hips to get maybe 2-3 degrees. For yourself, I wouldn't worry an incredible amount about trying to get super upright. I would just get into a position where you feel tension and a position where you feel strong and you're able to both, you know, push the bar off the floor with some with some stank on it, as well as finish through to lockout. So we don't want to be so tipped over that the bar comes up off the floor really easily and we get stuck at lockout. And we don't want to be so upright that we can't break the bar off the floor, but if we did, it would be straight up through lockout. So just learning to optimize your position, I think, will go a long ways, but you're doing a way better job than you think you are. So up next, we got some videos from Wesley Chu. Now Wesley, your deadlift video didn't work, so this is what's happening. This is your fault. Anyways, you did send in a squat video, and in your squat, your technique looks really, really good until about the 3rd rep here, the 3rd and 4th rep, and you mentioned this in your email. You know very well this happens, but you have a little bit of a hip shift problem. So he comes up, hits a sticking point, and as he hits a sticking point, if these are his butt cheeks, he goes whoop, a little bit like that over to the side. So he's got a fairly classic sort of hip shift. Now, there's a ton of different approaches you can take. I had a fairly pronounced hip shift and have managed to mostly rectify that problem. I've helped a couple of my lifters rectify similar problems. So here's a couple of the things that we did. Number 1, isolateral work. So single leg press, lunges, split squats, etc., to make sure that we're relatively evenly matched in strength leg to leg. The other thing is going to be repatterning your squat. So I think, especially in the case of most hip shift, it's a bit of a disconnect between the sort of thoracic region and the lumbar region and pelvis. So we're losing connection between the ribs, or sorry, between, let me try that again. We're losing connection between the trunk and the hips. That's why there's a shift, that's why there's a disconnect. What we want to do is work on bracing so that everything becomes a more rigid and solid unit throughout the movement. So I would say practice your bracing, practice maintaining your bracing better throughout your squat, and also look at doing some more single-legged stuff. And I don't think that's going to be the cure, but I think it can help. As far as the hip shift in itself, it can be a pretty long and arduous process. So you probably have to dial back the weight on the bar. You'll probably have to work up to weights where you don't see the hip shift and continue kind of trying to push your threshold up a little bit that way for at least a while until you start to see a lot less of that hip shift. And he also submitted a video of his girlfriend's deadlift. So we'll put that up here. Now, so his girlfriend's deadlift looks mostly good. It's a conventional pull, and she loses it right around the knee. You'll notice she wasn't actually able to complete the 3rd rep here. So as she's coming up off the floor, one thing that it looks like to me might be happening is that she's trying to pull back too early. So in our conventional deadlift, I usually coach people to try and stay right over the bar until the bar passes the knees, because if you pull back before then, your knees are actually going to push forward into the bar as you pull back. It's just sort of how things have to move in space. So I would coach her to try and stay over the bar until the bar comes past the knees, because I think she's pulling back a little bit too early. Hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully you can relate that to her or have her tune in to the Calgary Barbell YouTube channel and check that out. But I hope both you guys continue to lift big weights and stay away from hip shifts and pulling back too early. Next up, we got a video from Garrett Sosa. Now Garrett is not having as smooth of a lockout as he would like, his own words. And it's pretty standard lockout issue for deadlifts. It's something we talk about quite a bit on the channel, and I think you can see right as he initiates the pull, we maybe need to pull the slack out of the bar better. And what I mean by that is leverage your upper back against the bar as you pull in, so that when you set your back in that position, you're set and you push from there. Because you can see as he starts, he's here, and then he goes whoop, and then starts pulling from there. What happens is he loses position in his low back, and his hips sort of tuck under him. So as he comes up, he's now as extended as he can get through his hips and needs to extend his back to finish, which makes it very challenging. Your back's not as strong as extending, not as strong at extending under heavy load as your hips are. So we need to work on your lumbar position. We need to work on your patience off the floor. So not kind of jerking into the weight, but rather setting yourself into the weight so that you have adequate tension on the on the bar before you initiate your deadlift, and making sure we pull the slack out of the bar as you do so. So those couple of things I think should go a long ways. Definitely, I know I've said this before, but start filming your deadlifts from straight on side angle. Any sumo pullers who are having lockout issues, any sumo puller having lockout issues, film your deadlifts from the side. Film them from a straight on side angle so you can see what's going on with your lower back, because I would say 8, maybe even 9 times out of 10, if you're having lockout issues in the sumo, it's not that your hips aren't strong enough, it's not that you need to be doing block pulls or rack pulls or anything like that. It's that you're not in a good enough position when you initiate the lift, and it's coming back to bite you literally in the ass at the top of your deadlift. Film it from the side, make sure your back's extended, your hips are finishing the movement, you're not extending here and then trying to finish with your back. Keys. This last video comes from Turkey, because people in Turkey love Calgary Barbell for some reason. I think that's awesome. I don't know why everybody in Turkey loves Calgary Barbell so much, but I'm super happy that they do. So thank you to all the Turkish people who tune in to our channel and who like our stuff, because that's sweet. So Rex is doing some sumo deadlifts here. Now you'll notice as he initiates, he gets pulled forward just slightly, and then when he goes for the second rep, he gets pulled forward too much and isn't able to get the bar off the floor. So biggest thing for that is, I think, keep that weight on your heels, shift it back ever so slightly, and make sure you're really pulling those lats on hard to keep that bar nice and close. If your lats are better engaged when you initiate the lift, you won't get that bar coming up and kind of sneaking away from you. Keep those lats pulled tight, like you're trying to pull the bar against your shins, and I think that'll go a long ways towards keeping that bar from pulling you forward. So weight shift back on your feet ever so slightly, like a pivot at the ankles. JP Couchy does a really good video about that and how to sort of appropriately place the weight on your feet by just moving your ankle position. And keep your lats on a little bit harder to keep that bar closer as you initiate the pull so it doesn't sneak away from you there. But that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Form Check Friday. See you next week and in the comments below.